I was 7 years into what I thought was a happy marriage with my wife Natalie. We had built a comfortable life in Seattle where I worked as a software developer while she pursued her career in marketing. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. The house, the cars, the vacations. But lately something had changed. Natalie had become more distant, more critical of everything I did. That night, as we prepared for our anniversary dinner at her parents' house, I overheard her laughing on the phone about something related to me. I had no idea that evening would change everything. If you're watching this from a place where you felt disrespected by someone you love, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, what happens next changed everything. I met Natalie during our junior year of college. She was studying marketing, and I was pursuing computer science. We connected instantly over our shared love for indie music and hiking the trails around campus. Back then, we were just two ambitious kids with big dreams, supporting each other through final exams and job applications. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a tech startup in Seattle. The pay wasn't great, but the opportunity was promising. Natalie followed me to Seattle, and we moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment downtown. Those early years were tough but sweet. We saved every penny, ate ramen noodles more times than I care to admit, and spent our free weekends exploring the city or hiking in the mountains. My career took off faster than expected. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice and was leading my own team of developers. The hours were long and demanding, often stretching into nights and weekends, but Natalie understood my drive. Or at least she said she did. We moved to a nicer apartment, then eventually bought our house in a desirable neighborhood with a view of Puget Sound. When are you two planning to start a family? This question became a constant refrain from Natalie's parents, especially her mother, Susan. We had agreed to wait until we were financially secure, maybe around our early 30s. Natalie seemed content with this plan, but I sometimes caught her staring wistfully at children in the park. Her parents made no secret of their disappointment, particularly during holiday gatherings where her sister Amanda paraded around her two perfect children. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs sooner. About a year ago, small changes in Natalie's behavior began to surface. She became oddly protective of her phone, always keeping it face down or taking it with her even for quick trips to the bathroom. Our conversations grew shorter, less meaningful. When I asked about her day, her answers became vague and dismissive. Just the usual stuff, nothing interesting, she would say, quickly changing the subject. She started staying out later, with friends from work coming home with the faint smell of unfamiliar cologne. When I tried to kiss her, she would turn her cheek or pull away, claiming she was tired or had a headache. The criticisms began subtly at first. "Do you really think that shirt looks good on you?" Or, "Maybe you should join me at the gym sometime." Each comment stung, but I brushed them off, assuming she was just going through something, or that maybe I really did need to pay more attention to my appearance. I tried everything to reconnect with her. I planned surprise date nights at restaurants we used to love. I bought tickets to see her favorite bands when they came to town. I even took cooking classes secretly so I could prepare her favorite meals. For a while, these gestures seemed to work. She would smile, reminisce about our early days together, and for a few hours it felt like we had found our way back to each other. Then came Jason, her new coworker. Natalie mentioned him casually at first, just another person on her team. But soon his name peppered her conversations with increasing frequency. "Jason thinks," and "Jason says" became common phrases in our home. When I expressed my discomfort, she accused me of being insecure and controlling. "He's just a friend and mentor, Felix." God, why are you so paranoid? I wanted to trust her. I truly did. So I swallowed my suspicions and insecurities, convincing myself that I was overreacting. After all, we had 7 years of history together. That had to count for something, right? For our anniversary, I had splurged on a watch she had been eyeing for months. A sleek rose gold timepiece that cost nearly 2 months of my salary. I imagined the look on her face when she opened it, hoping it might reignite the spark we had lost. The dinner at her parents' house was my idea, actually. I thought having her family around might create a warm, celebratory atmosphere that would remind her of all the reasons we had chosen each other. Her father, Richard, had never been my biggest fan, but her mother, Susan, was kind enough, and I had always gotten along well with her brother-in-law, Trevor. I was nervous but hopeful as we drove to the suburbs that evening, the small gift box tucked safely in my jacket pocket. "Try to make a good impression tonight," Natalie said as we pulled into her parents' driveway. "Dad's been stressed about his investments lately." I nodded, straightening my tie in the rearview mirror. "It's going to be a great night," I assured her, squeezing her hand. She didn't squeeze back. The sprawling Tudor-style home where Natalie grew up always made me feel slightly inadequate. Despite my success, Richard never missed an opportunity to remind me that I came from more modest beginnings than their family. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and expensive artwork adorned every wall. The dining room table alone probably cost more than my first car. Susan greeted us at the door with air kisses and a glass of champagne for each of us. "The golden couple has arrived," she exclaimed, ushering us inside. I noticed she held Natalie's embrace a beat longer than mine. Richard stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, engaged in conversation with Trevor. He acknowledged our arrival with a curt nod before returning to their discussion about the stock market. Amanda, Natalie's sister, immediately pulled her aside to show off photos of her recent family vacation to the Maldives. I stood awkwardly in the center of the living room, sipping my champagne and trying to look comfortable. This was nothing new. I had always felt like an outsider in this family. But tonight even Natalie seemed to have crossed some invisible line, leaving me stranded on the other side. Dinner was served at 8, an elaborate spread of prime rib, roasted vegetables, and potatoes dauphinoise prepared by their personal chef. As we took our seats, I attempted to ease the tension with casual conversation. "The tech sector is doing really well this quarter," I offered, looking at Richard. "Our company just secured a major client that should boost our stock significantly." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Is that so strange? I haven't heard anything about it." Before I could respond, Natalie let out a short laugh. "That's because Felix's team hasn't actually closed the deal yet. He's been working on this pitch for months, but keeps hitting roadblocks." I felt my face flush. It was true that the deal wasn't finalized, but we were in the final stages of negotiation, something I had shared with Natalie in confidence during a vulnerable moment of professional anxiety. "It's a complex integration," I explained, "but we're making excellent progress." "Felix always thinks he's making excellent progress," Natalie said, her voice tinged with mockery. "Remember that home renovation project he started last year? Our guest bathroom was unusable for 3 months. Everyone chuckled and I forced a smile, trying to be a good sport. But as the wine flowed, Natalie's jabs became more frequent and more pointed. When the conversation turned to my current project at work, I began explaining the innovative software solution my team was developing. Midway through, Natalie interrupted with an exaggerated imitation of my presentation style. "And then we'll utilize a cross-platform integration to maximize user experience," she mimicked in a nasally voice, using awkward hand gestures that I certainly didn't make. "It's going to revolutionize the industry." Her family erupted in laughter. My stomach tightened as I realized she was referring to a practice presentation I had given in our living room last week when I was preparing for a meeting with investors. I had been nervous asking for her feedback afterward. She had said I did fine. "Felix gets so nervous before these presentations," Natalie continued, turning to her sister. "He once threw up before a big meeting. Had to change his shirt in the office bathroom." That was another confidence I had shared during a moment of vulnerability. I had suffered from anxiety and stage fright since childhood, something I was working hard to overcome and had trusted her enough to confide in her about. Richard leaned forward, swirling his scotch. "Perhaps you should consider a position that's less public-facing, Felix. Not everyone is cut out for leadership roles." "Dad," Natalie said with feigned defense, "Felix is trying his best. It's not his fault. He's more comfortable behind a computer than dealing with people." Trevor, who had remained relatively quiet, joined in. "How's that retirement fund coming along, Felix? With the market the way it is, you should be pretty aggressive at your age." Before I could answer, Natalie laughed. "Felix is about as aggressive with investments as he is in bed, which is to say not very." The table erupted in laughter while I sat there utterly humiliated. My private life, my insecurities, my failures, all laid bare for their amusement. I felt something break inside me, a final thread snapping. "Excuse me," I managed to say. "I need to use the restroom." No one seemed to notice as I left the table, their laughter following me down the hallway. In the guest bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Who was this person I had become? A punching bag. A joke. I realized I had left my phone at the table and I needed to check an important email from work. Remembering that Natalie had a charger in her purse, I headed back toward the dining room but stopped when I saw her bag on the entryway console. We had an agreement that I could use her charger when needed, so I didn't think twice about reaching for her purse. As I rummaged for the charger, my fingers brushed against her phone. The screen lit up, revealing several notifications from someone named Jason. The most recent message made my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Does the fool suspect anything?" With trembling hands, I unlocked her phone. She had never changed her password from our anniversary date, and opened the message thread. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Hundreds of messages spanning months, detailing their affair in explicit terms. Photos I could never unsee. Plans for their future together. One exchange particularly caught my eye. "Jason, how do you put up with him, Natalie? Just counting the days until your promotion comes through. Then we can stop sneaking around." "Jason, what did you tell him about Thursday night, Natalie?" "The usual. Drinks with the girls. He believes anything I say." They had been laughing about me for months. Natalie had shared intimate details of our marriage with this man. They had met in our home when I was working late. They had plans to leave once Jason secured his promotion to a management position. I scrolled further and found messages where she complained about me to him, mocking everything from my appearance to my performance in bed. She had even sent him screenshots of private conversations between us. I felt physically ill, but beneath the nausea, something else was building. A strange, calm clarity. In that moment, standing in the hallway of my in-laws' house, with irrefutable evidence of my wife's betrayal in my hands, I made a decision. I took a few moments to compose myself in the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and taking deep breaths. The initial shock was giving way to something else, a sense of clarity and resolve I hadn't felt in years. The pain was still there, a searing ache in my chest, but it was now fuel for what I needed to do next. I returned to the dinner table with a calm demeanor that seemed to momentarily confuse everyone. They had clearly been laughing about something, probably me, but faltered when they saw me. "Everything okay, Felix? You were gone a while." Susan asked, a hint of genuine concern in her voice. "Actually, I'm feeling much better now," I replied, taking my seat and reaching for my wine glass. "Please don't let me interrupt." "What were we discussing?" Natalie shot me a strange look but quickly recovered. "I was just telling everyone about that client who kept mispronouncing your name at the Christmas party." "Oh, that was hilarious," I agreed, laughing along. "He kept calling me Phoenix all night." The tension in the room eased slightly as everyone seemed relieved that I was being a good sport. The conversation continued, and I participated more actively than before, even joining in when the topic turned to my questionable fashion choices over the years. "Remember that phase when Felix thought turtlenecks were appropriate for summer?" Natalie quipped. "Classic Felix." I responded with a self-deprecating smile, but inside I was counting down the minutes. When the dinner plates were cleared and dessert was served, Natalie turned to me with an almost convincing display of affection. "We should tell them our anniversary plans, honey." "Actually," I said, setting down my fork, "I do have something special prepared for our anniversary." The table went quiet as everyone turned their attention to me. Natalie's eyes lit up with what looked like genuine curiosity. 7 years is a significant milestone. I continued, reaching into my jacket pocket. But instead of pulling out the watch box, I produced a folded set of documents. That is why I wanted to mark the occasion with something meaningful. I placed the papers on the table and slid them toward Natalie. Divorce papers, already filled out with all the relevant details. The silence that followed was absolute. Natalie's face drained of color as she stared at the documents. "What is this supposed to be? Some kind of joke?" Richard finally demanded. "Not a joke," I said calmly. "Just the natural conclusion to what has become a fraudulent marriage." I turned to Natalie. "I found your texts with Jason. All of them." Natalie's hand flew to her mouth. "Felix, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted, still maintaining my composure. "Your messages were quite thorough. Particularly the ones where you both laughed about how clueless I was, or the ones where you shared intimate details about our marriage. Or my personal favorite, your plans to leave once Jason gets his big promotion." I took out my phone and began reading directly from screenshots I had taken. "Here's one from last month. I cannot wait to leave this boring life behind. Felix has no idea what is coming." And this gem from last week. "Let him pay for dinner again. Might as well get something out of him while we wait." Natalie's face crumpled as her carefully constructed world began to collapse. "It is not what it looks like," she stammered. "Jason and I are just friends." We joke around. Friends don't send each other the kind of photos I found I cut in. And friends certainly don't make plans to move in together while one is still married. Amanda and Susan were staring at Natalie in shock, while Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You cannot possibly think you can just end this marriage," he sputtered. "Our families have investments together. There are considerations, all accounted for," I assured him. "I have documented every asset we share, including evidence that Natalie has been using our joint account to buy gifts for Jason. That Rolex was not for her cousin's graduation, by the way." I nodded toward Natalie, who looked like she might be sick. "I have already moved half of our savings to a separate account," I continued. "Completely legal, as my lawyer assured me. And speaking of legalities, Richard, your threats last Christmas about destroying me financially if I ever hurt your daughter constitute witness intimidation if used in the context of divorce proceedings." Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Trevor Ever the opportunist began inching away from him, as if to distance himself from the sinking ship. I reached back into my pocket and pulled out the small jewelry box. "I was going to give you this tonight," I said to Natalie, placing it on the table without opening it. "I worked overtime for months to afford it." Natalie reached for the box with trembling hands, but I slid it back into my pocket. "I think I will return it instead. The jeweler has a decent refund policy." I stood up, buttoning my jacket. "One more thing you might find interesting. I ran into Jason's manager at the gym last week. Turns out Jason did not get that promotion he has been promising you. In fact, he is being transferred to the Minneapolis office next month. Apparently his performance reviews have been subpar." Natalie's face crumpled completely at this news. Her entire plan, our divorce, her new life with Jason, was disintegrating before her eyes. Richard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "You listen to me, you ungrateful." Before you continue, I interrupted. "You should know that I have been recording this entire dinner." I tapped my phone. Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings, but given that everyone here has been openly speaking in what lawyers call a reasonable expectation of being heard, this would constitute public conversation. Admissible, if we needed to establish a pattern of emotional abuse. It was a bluff. I had not actually been recording, but the effect was immediate. Richard sank back into his chair, deflated. "Natalie," I said, turning to my soon-to-be ex-wife, "I have arranged to stay at the Marriott downtown tonight. I will come by the house tomorrow while you are at work to collect my essential belongings. My lawyer will contact you on Monday to begin formal proceedings." As I walked toward the door, I heard Natalie's desperate voice behind me. "Felix, please. We can work this out." I made a mistake. I paused at the threshold, not turning around. "No, Natalie, you made a choice. Several choices, actually. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, every time you mocked me behind my back, or to my face like tonight. Those were all choices." With that, I walked out, closing the door quietly behind me. As I got into my car, I felt something I had not expected, not just anger or vindication, but a profound sense of relief. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I could breathe freely again. That night at the Marriott marked the beginning of my new life. I barely slept, cycling through waves of anger, grief, and eventually a strange sense of liberation. By morning, my phone had 37 missed calls and 23 text messages from Natalie, ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations. I read none of them in detail, simply forwarded them to my lawyer as evidence of harassment and blocked her number. True to my word, I went to our house the following day while Natalie was at work. I took only what was undeniably mine: clothes, personal items, my computer equipment, and a few sentimental objects from my life before her. I left behind the furniture, the appliances, and all the trappings of our shared life. Material things seemed remarkably unimportant now. I found temporary accommodation in a furnished apartment downtown close to my office. The place was soulless and generic, but it served its purpose. In those first few weeks, Natalie's attempts to reconcile became increasingly desperate. She showed up at my workplace with tears streaming down her face, causing a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. She sent emails to my work account pleading for a second chance. She even enlisted mutual friends to advocate on her behalf. I maintained my resolve, communicating only through my lawyer. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly thanks to the evidence I had gathered, and Natalie's increasingly erratic behavior, which only strengthened my case. Her father tried to apply pressure through business connections, but my company's legal team, impressed by my professional conduct throughout the ordeal, offered their support. The hardest part was not the legal battles or the division of assets. It was facing myself in the mirror each night. How had I missed the signs? How had I allowed myself to become someone who could be treated with such contempt? These questions haunted me as I lay awake in my temporary home. Depression crept in like a fog, thick and disorienting. Some days I could barely muster the energy to get out of bed. My work suffered. My health declined. I lost weight, existing primarily on coffee, and whatever takeout was easiest to order. At my lowest point, about a month after moving out, I reluctantly followed a colleague's recommendation and called a therapist. Dr. Marshall was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in trauma and betrayal. Our first session was uncomfortable, filled with long silences and my halting attempts to articulate what had happened without breaking down. "You have experienced a profound betrayal," she told me plainly. "Not just infidelity, but a systematic undermining of your self-worth by someone who was supposed to protect your heart. That is a form of emotional abuse." Those words, emotional abuse, struck me like a physical blow. I had never considered myself a victim. In my mind, that term was reserved for others, not for successful, educated men like me. But as Dr. Marshall helped me unpack the patterns of our relationship, I began to see how Natalie's behavior had gradually eroded my confidence and isolated me from my support systems. Therapy became my lifeline. Twice weekly sessions where I learned to process my anger without being consumed by it, to grieve the future I had imagined without getting stuck in bitterness. It was slow, painful work, but necessary. Around the third month, I reached out to old friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. James, my college roommate, immediately drove up from Portland to spend a weekend with me. We hiked the trails around Seattle, just like we used to do before adult responsibilities took over. Reconnecting with him reminded me that I had a life before Natalie, and could have one after her. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that fateful dinner. The settlement was fair, more than fair according to my lawyer, who was surprised by how quickly Natalie's team conceded to our terms. I later learned that her affair with Jason had become public knowledge at their workplace after she drunkenly made a scene when he announced his transfer. Both their professional reputations were tarnished, and she was passed over for a promotion she had been expecting. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall. By then, I had moved beyond wanting revenge to focusing on rebuilding. A former colleague reached out with an opportunity at a promising startup in Austin, Texas. The position offered more responsibility, better compensation, and most importantly, a fresh start in a new city where nothing would remind me of Natalie. Taking that job was the best decision I could have made. Austin's vibrant energy and welcoming community helped heal parts of me that therapy alone could not reach. I found a small house with a yard where I planted a garden. Something I had always wanted to do, but Natalie had dismissed as too suburban. I joined a local hiking group, took cooking classes for real this time, and even tried rock climbing, discovering physical capabilities I never knew I possessed. One evening, about a year after the divorce, I received a final email from Natalie. She had lost her marketing job and moved back in with her parents temporarily. Jason was engaged to someone else in Minneapolis. She wrote that she was seeing a therapist of her own and beginning to understand the damage she had caused. She did not ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, just acknowledged her role in destroying our marriage and wished me well. I read the email twice, felt a moment of pity for her, and then deleted it without responding. Some chapters are better left closed. The journey taught me invaluable lessons about self-respect. I had allowed small disrespects to accumulate until they became unbearable humiliations. I had prioritized keeping the peace over standing up for myself. Never again. In my new relationships, friendships, and eventually dating, I established clear boundaries from the start. The experience also taught me about red flags, not just in others but in myself. I had ignored my intuition for too long, making excuses for Natalie's behavior rather than confronting the problems directly. I became more attentive to my own feelings, more willing to acknowledge when something felt wrong. Perhaps the most important lesson was about courage. It takes tremendous courage to walk away from something that once meant everything to you, to face an uncertain future alone, rather than endure a toxic present with someone else. I found that courage in myself on the night I left that dinner table, and it has guided me ever since. Today, 3 years later, my life bears little resemblance to the one I shared with Natalie. I lead a successful development team at a company that values my contributions. I own my home outright, a modern loft in a creative district of Austin. I have meaningful friendships and have even cautiously begun dating again. The pain has not disappeared entirely. I suspect some scars will always remain, but it no longer defines me. I have found a kind of freedom in vulnerability, in admitting that I was hurt, but refusing to be hardened by the experience. I have learned that choosing yourself is not selfish, but necessary, that walking away from toxicity is not giving up, but moving forward. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between staying in a painful situation or stepping into an uncertain future? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to choose themselves. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the strength to honor yourself always.